Yesterday morning, I sat in a conference room on the 43rd floor of a building I used to be forbidden from entering. Across from me sat the person who destroyed my career, stole my work, humiliated me in front of everyone I respected, and smiled while doing it. But this time, they were the one trembling. This time, they were the one begging. And this time, I held every single card. 5 years. That's how long I waited for this moment. 60 months of discipline, strategy, and cold, calculated patience. People always say revenge is a dish best served cold. But let me tell you something. When it's been marinating for half a decade, when you've spent 1,800 days perfecting every detail, when you've thought through every possible outcome and contingency plan, cold doesn't even begin to describe it. It's glacial. It's Arctic. It's absolute zero. And yesterday, it all came together so perfectly, so beautifully, that even I could hardly believe it was real. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how sweet this victory tastes, you need to know where it all began. You need to feel what I felt. You need to understand the depth of the betrayal, the weight of the humiliation, and the fire that kept burning inside me when everyone else told me to just let it go and move on. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt the crushing weight of injustice when no one believed you, if you've ever fantasized about the moment karma finally catches up to the person who wronged you, then you're going to want to hear every single word of this story. Hit that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and buckle up, because this is one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll ever hear. Trust me, you're going to remember this one. Let me take you back to where this all started. 5 years and 3 months ago, to be exact. Back then, I was a completely different person. Younger, obviously. More naive, definitely. But most of all, I was optimistic. I believed in people. I believed that hard work, talent, and integrity would be rewarded. I believed that partnerships were built on mutual respect and trust. God, I was an idiot. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what I did. I was a software developer. Not just any developer, but someone who lived and breathed code. While other kids were outside playing, I was teaching myself programming languages. While my college roommates were at parties, I was in my dorm room building apps, creating tools, dreaming up solutions to problems most people hadn't even realized existed yet. By the time I was 26, I had created something special. Something I knew could change everything. It was an algorithm. A proprietary piece of software that could optimize data processing in a way that the market desperately needed, but didn't have. I'm being vague here because the technical details aren't what matter, but trust me when I say this. What I had built was revolutionary. It could save companies millions in processing time and server costs. It was elegant, efficient, and I had spent 3 years perfecting it. But here's the thing about being a brilliant programmer. That doesn't automatically make you a brilliant business person. I knew my code was gold, but I didn't know how to turn it into a company. I didn't have connections in the industry. I didn't have business experience. I didn't have the first clue about venture capital, pitch decks, or market positioning. That's where they came in. Let's call this person Jordan. Not their real name, obviously, but it'll do. Jordan was everything I wasn't. Charismatic, connected, business savvy, and confident. We met at a tech conference where I had been invited to give a small presentation about my work. The room was half empty. Mostly just students and a few curious developers. But Jordan was there, sitting in the 3rd row, leaning forward, taking notes, asking questions that showed they actually understood what I was talking about. After my presentation, they approached me with this big, warm smile and an outstretched hand. That algorithm you presented? That's not just good, that's game-changing, they said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. You've got something that could be worth tens of millions, maybe more. But you're not going to get there alone. You need someone who understands the business side. You need a partner. And just like that, the seed was planted. Over the next few weeks, Jordan and I met for coffee, lunch, drinks. They painted this beautiful picture of what we could build together. They had an MBA from a top school, had worked at several tech startups, knew investors, understood the landscape. They talked about their vision for taking my algorithm to market, about the company we could build, about the impact we could have. You're the genius behind the product, they'd say. leaning back in their chair with that easy confidence I envied. I'm the person who can sell it, scale it, and make us both rich. This is what partnerships are built for: complementary skills, mutual respect, shared vision. Shared vision. Those words echoed in my head like a promise. I was hesitant at first. This algorithm was my baby, my life's work. The idea of sharing control made my stomach clench. But Jordan was persuasive. They wore me down with logic and charm. "Look," they'd say, putting their hand on my shoulder like we were old friends. "You can keep this algorithm to yourself. Tinker with it in your apartment. And maybe, in 10 years you'll figure out how to monetize it. Or we can do this together, the right way, and in 2 years we'll both be millionaires." 2 years. That timeline felt important, urgent. Like if I didn't act now, I'd miss my window. So I said yes. We drew up a partnership agreement. 50-50 equity split. We'd co-found the company together. I'd handle the technology side. They'd handle business development, fundraising, and operations. On paper, it looked fair. Equal partners with equal stakes and equal success. I should have hired a lawyer to review the contract more carefully. I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted on protections. But I was too excited, too trusting, too grateful that someone with Jordan's experience wanted to work with me. I signed the papers on a Wednesday afternoon. We shook hands. Jordan suggested we celebrate with champagne. To the beginning of something amazing. They toasted, clinking their glass against mine. I remember the exact taste of that champagne, dry, slightly bitter, with bubbles that fizzed on my tongue. I remember thinking I was the luckiest person in the world. That feeling lasted exactly 4 months. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. We set up our company, let's call it TechFlow, and got to work. I continued refining the algorithm, improving its efficiency, expanding its applications. Jordan focused on building our brand, reaching out to potential investors, setting up meetings. We worked out of a tiny shared office space, the kind where you can hear every conversation happening in the next cubicle, and the coffee is always burnt. But neither of us cared. We were building something. We had momentum. Jordan seemed to be everywhere, always networking, always in meetings, always coming back with stories about promising conversations with investors who were very interested or potential clients who were extremely impressed. Meanwhile, I was in front of my computer 16 hours a day, making sure our product was flawless. Looking back now, I can see the red flags. I can see the warning signs I was too blind to notice at the time. The first sign was subtle. Jordan started making decisions without consulting me. Small things at first. Changing our company branding without discussion. Hiring a marketing consultant I'd never heard of. Signing us up for conferences without asking if I could attend. When I brought it up, they'd wave it off with that charming smile. "Hey partner, you've got enough on your plate perfecting the tech. That's your domain. Let me handle the business stuff. That's my domain. Trust me, okay? Trust." That word again. The second sign was the way they started talking about my company instead of our company in certain conversations. I'd hear them on phone calls sometimes, speaking to investors or potential clients. "Yeah, I founded TechFlow," they'd say casually. "Built it from the ground up." Sometimes they'd add, "I've got a great developer on my team," like I was an employee instead of an equal partner. I told myself I was being paranoid, oversensitive. Jordan was just being conversational, probably. That's how business people talk, right? The third sign was when they started restricting my access to information. Our shared cloud storage suddenly had folders I couldn't open. "Oh, that's just financial stuff and investor documents," Jordan explained when I asked. "Boring business stuff you don't need to worry about. Focus on what you do best, the code." Every time I raised a concern, they made me feel like I was being difficult, paranoid, like I didn't understand how businesses worked. And maybe I didn't. Maybe this was normal. Maybe I was just inexperienced and anxious. So I kept my head down and kept coding. Then came the investor meetings. Jordan had been talking for weeks about a major investor who was interested in funding us. "This is it," they'd say, practically vibrating with excitement. "This is the big break we've been waiting for. This firm has deep pockets and a great track record. If we land this investment, we're set. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I spent the entire week before preparing, rehearsing answers to potential technical questions, making sure I could clearly explain every aspect of the algorithm. I bought a new shirt for the occasion, nothing fancy but nicer than my usual t-shirts. I wanted to make a good impression. Wednesday night, the evening before the meeting, Jordan called me. Not a text, an actual phone call, which was unusual. My stomach immediately tightened. Something felt off. "Hey, so slight change of plans for tomorrow," they said, their voice carrying that careful, measured tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news. The investors asked if we could move the meeting earlier, like 7 a.m. instead of 10. I know that's rough, but these guys are important, and we have to be flexible. 7 a.m., I repeated, already mentally adjusting my schedule. "Okay, yeah, I can do that. Should I meet you at their office?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. Actually, they've asked to keep the meeting small, just me. They want to get a sense of the business fundamentals first, and then, if things go well, we'll set up a second meeting where you present the technical side. Makes sense, right? Division of labor and all that. My chest felt tight. "Jordan, I'm the one who built the tech. Shouldn't I be there to answer questions about it?" "You absolutely should eventually. But trust me on this, okay? I've dealt with these investor types before. They want to talk business first. Revenue projections, market analysis, growth strategy. The tech demo comes later. We don't want to overwhelm them right out of the gate." That made sense. Sort of. I mean, I didn't really know how these things worked. "Besides," Jordan continued, their voice warm and reassuring, "you've been working yourself to death on the latest build. Take the morning off, sleep in. I'll handle this and I'll call you right after with all the details." "You're sure?" 100%. Partners trust each other, right? There was that word again. Trust. "Right," I said quietly. "Good luck tomorrow." "We don't need luck," Jordan replied, and I could hear the smile in their voice. "We've got something real. This is happening." We hung up. I sat on my couch in my tiny apartment, staring at my phone, trying to shake the uncomfortable feeling coiling in my gut like a snake. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30, too anxious to sleep anymore. I made coffee. Checked my phone. Nothing from Jordan yet, but that made sense. They were probably in the meeting. I tried to distract myself with work, making minor tweaks to the code, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting to that conference room across town, imagining how the meeting was going. By 10 a.m., I still hadn't heard anything. I sent a text. "How'd it go?" No response. By noon, I was pacing my apartment. I called. Straight to voicemail. By 2 p.m., I was seriously worried. I sent another text. "Are you okay? Just let me know the meeting is over." At 3:17 p.m., my phone finally rang. "Hey!" Jordan's voice was bright, almost manic with energy. Sorry. I know I went dark there for a bit. The meeting ran long, like really long. And then they took me out to lunch to keep talking. It went amazing. Better than amazing. We're getting funded. Relief washed over me like a wave. That's incredible. How much? $2 million to start, with another $3 million contingent on hitting certain milestones. This is it. This is what we've been working for. Wow, that's huge. So what's next? When do I meet with them? Another pause. Shorter this time, but definitely there. Well, here's the thing. We spent a lot of time going over the business structure, and they had some concerns about the partnership model. They're worried about having two decision makers at the top. They want a clear hierarchy, someone who's the definitive CEO. My stomach dropped. Okay, and they want that person to be me. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, pressing my free hand against the wall to steady myself. They think, and honestly, I agree with them, that companies work best with a single clear leader, Jordan continued, their words tumbling out fast now, like they wanted to get through this quickly. Someone who makes final decisions. It's not personal, it's just business structure. You'd still be a co-founder, still have significant equity, still be essential to the company. You'd just report to me instead of us being equal partners. Report to you. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. It's really just a formality. A title. Nothing would really change day to day. Except I'd no longer be an equal partner. You'd still have equity, still have influence, and honestly, doesn't this make sense? I mean, you're brilliant with code, but you've said yourself you don't love the business side. Let me handle that stress. You just focus on what you're great at, building amazing technology. They made it sound so reasonable, so logical, like they were actually doing me a favor. What if I say no? I asked quietly. The silence that followed was different from the previous pauses. This one was heavy, loaded. Then we don't get the funding, Jordan finally said. And without funding, we don't have a company. Look, I don't love this either, but this is how the game is played. These investors have terms. We either accept them or we walk away with nothing. All this work, all these months, it'll all be for nothing. My mind was racing, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell them to go to hell, to protect what was mine. But another part, the part that was tired and scared and desperate for this to work, whispered that maybe they were right. Maybe this was just how business worked. Maybe I was being naive and stubborn. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, but I need an answer by Monday. They want to move fast, and if we hesitate, they might move on to other opportunities. We hung up. I sat on my couch, phone still in my hand, feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. Everything felt wrong, but I couldn't quite articulate why. Was I being irrational? Was I letting pride get in the way of progress? I spent that weekend doing something I should have done months earlier. Reading through every document we'd signed, every agreement we'd made. And that's when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Buried in the partnership agreement, in Section 12, subsection C, paragraph 3, written in that dense legal language that makes your eyes glaze over, was a clause I'd completely missed. If either partner was designated CEO by mutual agreement or by majority vote of investors, that partner would gain controlling interest and decision-making authority over the company. I had signed away my protection without even realizing it. That Sunday night, I barely slept. My mind spun through scenarios, conversations I'd have with Jordan, arguments I'd make. By Monday morning, I'd decided I wasn't going to roll over. This was my work, my algorithm, my life. I deserved to be an equal partner. I called Jordan at 9 a.m. I've thought about it, and I can't agree to the new structure. This is my work, too. I built the core technology. I should have equal say in how the company is run. I understand how you feel. Do you? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like you're pushing me out of my own company. That's not what's happening. Look, can we meet in person? Hash this out face to face? This is too important for a phone call. We agreed to meet at our office at 11. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still. Jordan showed up exactly on time, carrying their laptop and wearing that same easy, confident expression that had charmed me from the beginning. Before we get into this, they said, sitting down across from me, I want you to know that I respect you. I respect your work. Everything I'm doing is because I believe in this company and what we can achieve. Then why does it feel like you're cutting me out? I'm not cutting you out. I'm trying to make sure we both succeed. But if you can't see that, if you're going to make this difficult, well, then maybe we need to talk about other options. What other options? Jordan opened their laptop, turned it to face me. On the screen was a document, a buyout offer. They were offering to purchase my shares of the company for $75,000. I actually laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. You're joking. The algorithm I built is worth millions, and you're offering me $75,000? The algorithm is worthless without someone who can monetize it. Without me, you've just got code sitting on a hard drive. With me, it's a company. I'm offering you a fair price for your current equity value. Take it, and you can walk away free and clear. No hard feelings. No hard feelings? My voice was rising now, anger overriding my usual conflict avoidance. You're stealing my work and you say no hard feelings? I'm not stealing anything. I'm running a business. If you don't want to be part of it under the new terms, fine. But you signed an agreement. I have rights too. And honestly, I don't think you're cut out for what comes next. This business is about to get intense, and I need people who are on board 100%, not fighting me every step of the way. The words hit like punches, each one carefully chosen to hurt, to make me doubt myself. You have until Wednesday to decide, they continued, closing their laptop. Accept the CEO structure and stay with the company in a subordinate role, or take the buyout and walk. But decide, because I'm moving forward with or without you. They stood up, grabbed their laptop and walked out, leaving me sitting alone in that small office, feeling like I'd just been hollowed out. I wish I could tell you I stood up for myself in that moment. I wish I could say I fought back, lawyered up, exposed what was happening. But the truth is messier and more painful than that. The truth is, I was scared, confused, doubting myself at every turn. I spent Monday night researching, making calls to legal aid services, trying to understand my options. The picture they painted wasn't encouraging. Yes, I could potentially sue for breach of contract or partnership violations, but lawsuits take time, money, and energy. I'd be going up against someone who had business connections and resources I didn't have. I'd be labeled as difficult, litigious, a problem. Future employers and investors would see the lawsuit and run. Plus, and this is the part that still stings to admit, I wasn't certain I was in the right. Jordan kept insisting this was normal business practice. Maybe it was. Maybe I was being naive. Maybe my ego was getting in the way of what was actually best for the company. Self-doubt is a poison that seeps into every crack. Tuesday, I made calls to people I trusted, old professors, a few developers I'd worked with. Their advice was mixed. Some said fight. Some said take the money and move on. No one could give me a clear answer because the situation was too murky, too dependent on interpretations and variables I couldn't control. Wednesday morning arrived too fast. I called Jordan at the deadline. I'll take the buyout. There was a pause and then, I think you're making the right choice. This is better for everyone. I'll have the paperwork drawn up today. You can sign tomorrow, and we'll transfer the money by end of week. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. What happens to the algorithm? It stays with the company. You signed over the IP when we formed the partnership, remember? I did remember. God, I remembered. Will you at least give me credit? When you launch, will my name be attached to what I built? Another pause. We'll see how things develop. Branding is complicated, and we might need to simplify the narrative for investors and clients. But I'll make sure people know you contributed. Like I was a helpful intern instead of the creator. We hung up. I sat in my apartment, the same apartment where I'd coded every line of that algorithm, where I'd dreamed of changing the world, and I felt something inside me break. The paperwork came through the next day. I signed it in a fog, barely reading the words, just wanting it to be over. The money hit my account the following Monday. $75,000, gone in an instant once I paid off my student loans and credit card debt from the months I'd worked for free while building the company. For a while after that, I went through the motions of living without really being alive. I took a job at a mid-sized tech company doing boring, routine coding work. Nothing innovative, nothing special, just collecting a paycheck. My coworkers were nice. My boss was fine. The work was soul-crushingly mundane. I watched from a distance as TechFlow began to grow. Jordan was good at self-promotion, I'll give them that. They appeared in tech publications, gave interviews, spoke at conferences, always smiling, always confident, always talking about my vision and my company. My algorithm, the one I'd spent 3 years perfecting, was rebranded and launched 6 months after I left. The press releases and marketing materials made no mention of me. It was as if I'd never existed. Jordan had erased me from the story completely, and the algorithm took off. Clients signed up, revenue grew. TechFlow raised a Series A round, then a Series B. Within 2 years, the company was valued at $40 million. $40 million. And I had $75,000, most of which was already gone. Friends would send me articles sometimes, links to interviews with Jordan, thinking I'd want to know. I'd click through with this sick, masochistic curiosity, reading every word, torturing myself with what might have been. In one particularly painful interview, a journalist asked Jordan about the early days of the company. It was just me in the beginning, they'd said with that trademark charming smile. Just me and a crazy idea that I couldn't stop thinking about. I knew I'd built something special, and I was determined to see it through. I knew I'd built something special. They'd stolen not just my work and my company, but my story, my identity as a creator, and there was nothing I could do about it. People told me to move on. That's business, they'd say. It happens all the time. Learn from it and move forward. They meant well, but their words felt like sandpaper on an open wound. Because here's what they didn't understand. It wasn't just about the money or the company. It was about being erased, about having your life's work stolen and being told you should just be grateful for the scraps. It was about watching someone take credit for your brilliance while you toiled in obscurity. The anger settled into my bones like an ache that wouldn't go away. At night, lying awake in my bed, I'd fantasize about revenge. Not physical violence, I'm not that person, but justice. Vindication. I'd imagine scenarios where Jordan's lies were exposed, where the truth came out, where everyone knew what they'd done. But fantasies don't change reality. And reality was that Jordan had won. They had everything. And I had nothing but rage and regret. For 18 months, I stayed in that state. Angry but impotent, hurt but helpless, going through life like a ghost haunting his own existence. And then, something changed. The catalyst came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was at work, mindlessly debugging someone else's mediocre code, when I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. The sender's name was Morgan. Their profile showed they were a senior developer at a competing tech company, one of TechFlow's main rivals in the market. The message was brief. Hey, I know this is random, but I've been doing research on optimization algorithms in our space. I came across some academic work you published 3 years ago, and I'm pretty sure TechFlow's core algorithm is based on your research. Did you work with them? I'm asking because our company might have IP concerns if there's overlap. My heart started pounding. I read the message 3 times, my hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. I wrote back, I was actually one of the founders of TechFlow. Left early on. Why do you ask? Morgan's response came 10 minutes later. Would you be willing to talk? Maybe grab coffee? I think there might be something here worth discussing. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop in a neutral part of town. Morgan was maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a directness I immediately appreciated. We ordered black coffee for them, a latte for me, and found a quiet corner table. I'll cut right to the chase, Morgan said, leaning forward. Your name is on the original academic papers about the type of algorithm TechFlow is using, but you're nowhere on their company materials, no credit, nothing. That struck me as odd, so I dug deeper. Found out you were listed as a co-founder in some very early documents, but then you disappeared from all records right before their first major funding round. I wrapped my hands around my latte, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. What exactly are you trying to figure out? Whether TechFlow has legitimate rights to their core technology. See, my company has been trying to develop something similar, but TechFlow has been aggressively threatening patent infringement lawsuits against anyone who gets close to their space. They're claiming their algorithm is proprietary, unique, and fully owned by their CEO. But if that algorithm is actually based on your work, on research you published under your name, well, that changes things legally. The algorithm is mine, I said quietly. I built it. Every line. Jordan didn't write a single character of code. They handled business development. Can you prove that? I have all my original research files, version histories, commit logs going back years. Everything's time-stamped and documented. Morgan sat back, a slow smile spreading across their face. Then TechFlow might have a serious problem, and you, my friend, might have leverage. That conversation lasted 2 hours. Morgan explained that their company had been preparing to challenge TechFlow's dominance, but had been hesitant because of the potential legal quagmire. But if the foundational technology was actually mine, if I'd been forced out unfairly, if Jordan had misrepresented ownership, there could be grounds for multiple lawsuits, Morgan explained. Fraud, misrepresentation, potentially breach of fiduciary duty. Plus, if we can prove the algorithm was yours, it undermines their patent claims, which opens up the market for legitimate competition. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, suspicious despite my growing excitement. "Honestly, because my company benefits if TechFlow's monopoly gets broken up, but also because what happened to you is bullshit, and I've seen it happen too many times in this industry. People with business skills taking advantage of people with technical skills. It needs to stop." We exchanged contact information. Morgan promised to loop in their company's legal team to explore options. I floated through the rest of the day in a daze, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: hope. But hope without a plan is just wishful thinking. That night, I sat down at my computer, the same computer where I'd written that original algorithm, and I started to think strategically. Really strategically. For the first time since Jordan had pushed me out, I stopped wallowing and started planning. Revenge wasn't going to be emotional. It wasn't going to be impulsive. It was going to be methodical, patient, and absolutely devastating. I opened a new document and titled it Project Vindication. Then I started writing down everything I knew, everything I had, and everything I needed. The first rule of good revenge is this: emotion is the enemy of execution. You can be angry. Hell, you should be angry. But that anger needs to be channeled into cold, calculating precision. Sloppy revenge fails. Patient revenge succeeds. I spent the next 2 weeks organizing my evidence. Every piece of research, every document, every communication. I created a timeline showing my development of the algorithm from its earliest conception to its final implementation. I gathered all the emails between Jordan and me, paying special attention to messages where they acknowledged my technical contributions. The paper trail was damning. In early messages, Jordan had written things like, "Your algorithm is absolutely brilliant. This is going to change everything. I'm so lucky to be partnering with someone of your caliber. You're the genius behind this. I'm just the guy who's going to help you bring it to the world." Those messages would be important later. I also created detailed documentation of the algorithm itself, how it worked, why certain design choices were made, the mathematical principles underlying its efficiency. This wasn't just, "I have the code." This was proof of deep, comprehensive understanding that only the creator would have. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed allies, resources, and a strategy that went beyond just sue and hope for the best. That's when I started looking at the bigger picture. TechFlow had grown rapidly, but rapid growth often means cracks in the foundation. I started researching the company obsessively. I read every article, every press release, every financial disclosure document I could find. I joined industry forums and subreddits where TechFlow was discussed. I followed their employees on social media, not to stalk them, but to understand the company culture. And slowly, a picture emerged. TechFlow's growth had been impressive, but it hadn't been smooth. There were rumors of management issues, high turnover among technical staff, and concerns about whether the company could maintain its pace. Some anonymous reviews on Glassdoor suggested that Jordan ran the place like a dictatorship, taking credit for others' work and pushing out anyone who challenged them. Sound familiar? I also discovered something interesting. TechFlow was preparing for a Series C funding round. They were trying to raise $20 million to expand their operations and fend off increasing competition. The deal was supposedly close to closing, with several major venture capital firms involved. That funding round became my target. Because here's the thing about investment deals. They're built on trust and due diligence. Investors pour millions into companies based on the belief that the company's assets, technology, and leadership are legitimate and secure. If any of those foundations are questioned, especially regarding intellectual property ownership, the whole deal can collapse. My plan started to crystallize. Phase 1. Build an ironclad legal case with the help of Morgan's company's legal team, documenting my creation of the algorithm and Jordan's theft of my work. Phase 2. Wait until TechFlow's Series C funding was in its final, most vulnerable stage, when the due diligence was nearly complete and everyone was ready to sign. Phase 3. File lawsuits and make the IP dispute public, creating enough chaos and uncertainty to scare investors away from the deal. Phase 4. Watch TechFlow's valuation crumble as legal fees pile up, investors flee, and Jordan's reputation is destroyed. It was elegant, poetic, and it would take time. Over the next several months, I worked closely with Morgan and their legal team. We prepared documents, built our case, consulted with IP attorneys. The lawyers were cautiously optimistic. While Jordan hadn't technically done anything illegal in pushing me out of the company, thanks to that carefully worded contract, the claim that they had created the algorithm was potentially fraudulent. More importantly, there were questions about whether my buyout agreement had been signed under duress and whether I'd been given full information about the company's value at the time. But the legal team was clear. This would be a long, expensive fight. TechFlow would have resources to defend themselves. The outcome wasn't guaranteed. Unless, one of the attorneys said during a meeting, you can create enough public pressure and uncertainty that fighting becomes more costly than settling. Litigation is expensive. Bad publicity is devastating. If you can make this messy and public at the right moment, you maximize your leverage. That's when I knew the timing had to be perfect. While building the legal case, I also started building myself back up. I'd spent 2 years in a fog of bitterness and stagnation. If I was going to face Jordan again, I needed to be stronger than I'd ever been. I started taking on freelance projects on the side, challenging ones that pushed my skills. I wanted to prove to myself that I was still brilliant, still capable, still the person who'd created something revolutionary. Each successful project was like adding armor, rebuilding the confidence Jordan had systematically dismantled. I also started networking more deliberately. Not in a fake, transactional way, but genuinely connecting with other developers, engineers, and tech professionals. I attended meetups, contributed to open source projects, built a reputation in the community. I needed people who knew my work, who could vouch for my abilities, who would believe me when the time came. And I watched TechFlow, carefully, obsessively. I set up Google alerts for every mention of the company. I tracked their hiring patterns, their partnerships, their press coverage. I needed to understand their rhythm, their vulnerabilities, their pressure points. Month after month, I watched and waited. Jordan continued their meteoric rise. Tech publications put them on 30 under 30 lists. They gave TED-style talks about innovation and entrepreneurship. They preened and posed and collected accolades that should have been mine. Every article felt like a knife, but I was learning to transform that pain into fuel. Then, about 3 years into my planning, something interesting happened. TechFlow started facing real competition. Other companies had figured out how to build similar optimization tools. The market was catching up. TechFlow's growth began to slow. Their stock price, they'd gone public a year earlier, started to plateau. This created pressure. Jordan needed to show continued growth to keep investors happy. They needed that Series C funding to expand aggressively and maintain market dominance. The funding round was announced publicly about 6 months ago. $20 million. Led by a consortium of 3 major VC firms. The tech press covered it extensively. Jordan gave interviews about their vision for the future and how this capital would revolutionize the industry. That's when I knew. This was my moment, but I still had to wait for the exact right time. Too early and they'd have time to recover. Too late and the deal would be done. I needed to strike when the investors had done most of their due diligence, when everyone was confident and relaxed, when the contracts were being drawn up but not yet signed. I needed inside information about the timing. That's where the networking I'd been doing for 3 years paid off. Through my rebuilt professional connections, I'd become friendly with a few people who knew people who worked at TechFlow. Not close friends, I was careful never to ask directly about the company, but acquaintances who occasionally mentioned things in casual conversation. "Oh, Jordan's been stressed lately," one of them mentioned over coffee about 4 months ago. Apparently this funding round has been more complicated than expected. Due diligence is taking forever. Really? I kept my voice carefully neutral. I thought those deals usually moved pretty fast. Usually, yeah. But the investors are being really thorough this time, checking every contract, every patent, every piece of IP documentation. I guess when you're putting in 20 million, you want to be sure. My heart rate picked up, but I just nodded sympathetically and changed the subject. Over the next few months, I gathered more small pieces of information. The due diligence was in its final stages. The deal was expected to close in early October. Everyone at TechFlow was excited, anticipating the injection of capital. That's when I made my move. In late September, exactly 5 years and 1 month after Jordan had pushed me out of my own company, I filed 3 separate legal actions. First, a lawsuit against TechFlow and Jordan personally, alleging fraud, misappropriation of intellectual property, and breach of fiduciary duty. The suit claimed that the algorithm forming the basis of TechFlow's entire business was my creation, that I had been coerced into an unfair buyout, and that Jordan had systematically misrepresented their role in the company's founding. Second, a formal complaint to the Patent Office challenging TechFlow's patent claims on the algorithm, providing evidence that the technology was based on my earlier published research and personally developed code. Third, a demand letter to TechFlow's board of directors and investors, putting them on notice of the IP dispute and requesting an immediate halt to any funding agreements until the ownership issues were resolved. I timed the filings for a Friday afternoon, specifically, the last business day before the funding round's planned closing date. This gave Jordan and their legal team the entire weekend to panic before they could fully respond. But filing the lawsuits was only the beginning. I needed to make this public. I'd spent months preparing a detailed blog post, not emotional or whiny, but factual and devastating. I laid out the timeline of events, included excerpts from key emails, carefully redacted to show only what was legally permissible, displayed my technical documentation, and explained exactly how Jordan had stolen my work and erased me from the story. I titled it, "The Algorithm That Built a $100 Million Company and the Creator Who Got Erased." I posted it on Medium, on my LinkedIn, on relevant subreddits, on Hacker News. I didn't editorialize or exaggerate. I just presented facts, documents, evidence. I let the story speak for itself. The response was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the post had thousands of views. By Monday morning, it had been shared across every major tech platform. The tech press picked it up. Headlines appeared. TechFlow founder, accused of stealing core algorithm. IP dispute threatens. $20 million funding round. Former co-founder claims. They built TechFlow's technology. My phone started ringing with calls from journalists wanting interviews. Morgan's company issued a statement supporting my claims and announcing they were evaluating their own legal options regarding TechFlow's patent enforcement. But the real impact hit where I'd intended, with the investors. Venture capital firms are risk-averse when it comes to IP disputes. A company's technology is its most valuable asset. If that ownership is in question, the entire investment thesis collapses. Due diligence is supposed to catch these issues, but here was a credible, well-documented claim that had seemingly been missed or ignored. The investors immediately demanded an emergency meeting with TechFlow's board. They wanted answers. They wanted proof of clear IP ownership. They wanted assurances that this lawsuit was frivolous and would be quickly dismissed. Jordan couldn't provide those assurances. I knew this because Morgan had connections with people who had connections with people on TechFlow's board. The whisper network in tech is powerful if you know how to tap into it. Word filtered back to me. Chaos. Absolute chaos inside TechFlow's offices. The funding round was immediately frozen pending resolution of the IP dispute. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Remember those anonymous Glassdoor reviews I'd read years earlier, complaining about Jordan's management style? I reached out to some of those former employees, not to pressure them, just to let them know about the lawsuit and blog post. "I'm finally telling my story," I said. "If you have your own story about what it was like working there, maybe this is the moment to share it." Several of them did. New blog posts appeared. Former employees talked about Jordan's pattern of taking credit for others' work, of pushing out talented people who threatened their ego, of creating a toxic culture where loyalty to Jordan mattered more than actual competence. Each new story reinforced the narrative. Jordan wasn't a visionary founder. They were a con artist who knew how to take credit for other people's brilliance. The media narrative shifted from TechFlow faces IP lawsuit to is TechFlow built on lies. TechFlow's stock price, which had been steadily climbing in anticipation of the new funding, began to plummet. Investors got nervous. Some sold their shares. The company lost 15% of its market value in a single week. Jordan tried to fight back. They issued a statement calling my claims baseless, and the desperate actions of a disgruntled, former employee who left the company years ago. They insisted that all IP had been properly transferred and that they had complete ownership of the technology. But here's what they couldn't do. They couldn't produce evidence that they had created the algorithm. They couldn't explain why my name was on all the early research. They couldn't account for the emails where they'd explicitly praised my technical brilliance. Their lawyers could argue legal technicalities about contracts and ownership transfers, but they couldn't change the fundamental truth. I had built the technology, and everyone now knew it. 3 weeks after I filed the lawsuits, the investors officially pulled out of the Series C funding round, $20 million gone. The press release was professionally worded, citing concerns about IP clarity and the need for additional due diligence. But everyone knew what it really meant. They didn't trust TechFlow anymore. Without the new funding, TechFlow had a serious problem. They'd been counting on that capital to expand operations, hire new talent, and fight off growing competition. Now they were cash-strapped at the exact moment they needed resources most, but I still wasn't satisfied. Scaring away investors was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I wanted Jordan to feel what I'd felt. I wanted them to lose everything, the way I had. That's when phase 2 of my plan kicked in. Remember Morgan's company? The one that had been TechFlow's main competitor? The one that had originally reached out to me about the IP concerns? For 5 years, I'd been working with them in an increasingly important capacity. What had started as a consultation about TechFlow's algorithm had evolved into a full partnership. I'd helped them develop their own optimization technology, similar in function to my original algorithm but built from scratch, legally distinct, and in some ways even better. My role had grown from occasional contractor to senior technical advisor to, eventually, chief technology officer. That's right. While Jordan had been building their empire on my stolen work, I'd been building my own reputation and power base at their biggest competitor. And Morgan's company, let's call it OptimizeX, had been growing steadily. We'd captured market share from TechFlow over the past 2 years. We'd built strong relationships with clients who were frustrated with TechFlow's aggressive pricing and poor customer service. We'd positioned ourselves as the ethical alternative, a company that valued innovation and treated its people with respect. Now, with TechFlow wounded and cash desperate, we prepared to strike. OptimizeX made a formal acquisition offer for TechFlow. The price $12 million, a fraction of the company's value just a month earlier, but more than they were likely to get from anyone else given the IP uncertainty and financial pressure. The offer was structured cleverly. OptimizeX would assume TechFlow's assets and client contracts, but not its liabilities, meaning the lawsuits I'd filed would remain with Jordan personally. We'd bring over most of TechFlow's employees, the talented ones who'd been miserable under Jordan's leadership, but Jordan would not be offered a position in the merged company. We gave TechFlow's board exactly 72 hours to respond. I wasn't directly involved in the negotiation. That would have been too obvious, but Morgan kept me informed of every development. TechFlow's board was split. Some members wanted to fight, to reject the offer as an insulting lowball. Others recognized the reality of their situation. They were out of funding options, bleeding money on legal fees, watching their market share erode, and facing potentially years of expensive litigation. Ultimately, pragmatism won. 68 hours after we made the offer, TechFlow's board accepted. The announcement was made on a Wednesday morning. OptimizeX was acquiring TechFlow's assets, technology, and contracts. The merger would create a dominant player in the optimization software market. Jordan would be pursuing other opportunities. That phrase, pursuing other opportunities, is corporate speak for forced out in disgrace. The press coverage was extensive. Most articles focused on the business implications of the merger, but some of the more thoughtful pieces connected the dots. The founder accused of IP theft had just lost control of their company to the person they'd allegedly stolen from. One tech journalist wrote, "In a stunning reversal of fortune, the very technology that was at the center of the IP dispute has now changed hands, with the original creator ending up in a position of power, while the accused founder has been completely removed from the picture. It's a cautionary tale about the importance of treating your co-founders fairly." Reading that article, I felt something warm spread through my chest. Vindication, recognition, justice. But the best moment, the moment I'd been waiting 5 years for, was still to come. The acquisition deal required a transition period. Assets had to be transferred, contracts reassigned, systems integrated. This process would take about 3 weeks, culminating in a final closing meeting where both parties would sign the last documents and officially complete the merger. Both Jordan and I were required to be at that final meeting. The location was chosen by the lawyers, a neutral conference room in a downtown office building, 43rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Professional, impersonal, the kind of space where emotions were supposed to be checked at the door. I arrived early, wearing a suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion. Navy blue, perfectly tailored, expensive but not flashy. I wanted to look like someone who'd succeeded on their own merits, not like someone trying to prove something. Morgan was already there, along with our legal team and several OptimizeX board members. We made small talk, reviewed the final documents, prepared for the formalities. I was calm, eerily calm. 5 years of planning had led to this moment, and I was ready. Jordan arrived exactly on time, flanked by 2 lawyers. I saw them through the glass wall as they approached, and my breath caught in my throat. They looked diminished. Still dressed well, still carrying themselves with some semblance of confidence. But there was something different. The easy charm that had once seemed so natural now looked forced. The smile didn't reach their eyes. They looked tired, beaten, afraid. Our eyes met as they entered the conference room, and for a second, just a second, I saw genuine shock on their face, as if they'd forgotten I would be here, or hadn't fully processed what my presence meant. "Hello, Jordan," I said calmly, my voice steady. They swallowed hard. "Hey," that was it. No elaborate greeting, no fake warmth, just that one syllable, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. We all took our seats around the large conference table. Jordan sat directly across from me, their lawyers on either side like bodyguards. The OptimizeX team sat on my side. The literal visualization of how things had shifted couldn't have been more perfect. The lead lawyer, a woman named Patricia, who I'd worked closely with for the past year, began walking through the final documents. Asset transfers, client contract assignments, employee transition agreements. It was dry, technical, procedural. But every single line was a reminder of what Jordan was losing. TechFlow's proprietary algorithm, codebase, and related intellectual property will be fully transferred to OptimizeX upon execution of this agreement, Patricia read from the document. Jordan flinched slightly, barely noticeable, but I saw it. All active client contracts, including the enterprise agreements with... Patricia listed several major companies, accounts that Jordan had celebrated landing, that they'd bragged about in interviews. Another small flinch. The TechFlow brand name will be retired. All future operations will be conducted under the OptimizeX brand. Jordan's jaw tightened. We went through 37 pages of documentation. Each page represented something Jordan was giving up, some piece of the empire they'd built on my stolen work. With each paragraph, each clause, each signature line, I watched them shrink a little more. Finally, we reached the last page. The final signatures. Patricia slid the document across the table to Jordan. "Sign here, here, and here," she said, pointing to the highlighted signature lines. Jordan picked up the pen, but their hand was trembling slightly. They looked down at the paper, then up at me. our eyes locked. In that moment, I saw everything I needed to see: recognition, regret, fear, defeat. They knew. They knew that I had orchestrated all of this. They knew that every move, every pressure point, every perfectly timed action had been my doing. They knew that they'd underestimated me 5 years ago, and that underestimation had been their downfall. "Is there a problem?" Morgan asked politely. Jordan shook their head slightly, broke eye contact with me, and signed the papers. Their signature was shaky, lacking the bold flourish I remembered from years ago. Patricia collected the documents, smiled professionally, and said, "That concludes our business. The transaction is now complete. Thank you all for your cooperation during this process." People began standing, gathering their things, exchanging handshakes and pleasantries. The OptimizeX team was upbeat, talking about next steps and integration plans. Jordan's lawyers were quietly discussing something with them, probably logistics about the remaining lawsuits. As the room began to empty, I made my way around the table, slowly, deliberately, until I was standing directly in front of Jordan, just the two of us in that moment, even though others were still in the room. "Can we talk?" I said quietly, privately, just for a minute. Jordan hesitated, glanced at their lawyers, then nodded. We walked to the far corner of the conference room, by the windows, away from everyone else. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, looking out at the city below, both of us processing the weight of what had just happened. "You planned this," Jordan finally said. It wasn't a question. All of it. From the beginning. "Not from the beginning," I replied calmly. "I didn't start planning until about 3 years ago. The first 2 years I was just trying to survive what you did to me. I didn't do anything illegal." "No, you were smart about that. The contract protected you legally, but we both know what you did was wrong." Jordan turned to look at me directly. "I built that company. I raised the funding. I signed the clients. I made TechFlow successful." "You built a company on technology I created. You told the world you were the genius behind it. You erased me from the story. The tech was worthless without execution. You couldn't have done what I did." "You're right," I said, and saw surprise flash across their face. "I couldn't have done what you did back then. I didn't have the business skills or connections or experience. That's why I wanted a partner. That's why I trusted you. But you know what? I learned. I spent 5 years learning everything you knew and more. I built relationships. I developed business acumen. I became the complete package. Technical brilliance and strategic thinking. And then I used all of that to take everything away from you, just like you took everything from me." Jordan's face hardened. "So this is revenge. You destroyed my company for revenge." "No," I said, keeping my voice level. "I didn't destroy your company. I took back what was always mine. The algorithm, the technology, the recognition. That was my work. You just borrowed it for a while. Consider this me collecting what I'm owed, with 5 years of interest." "I could have made you rich," Jordan said, and there was a note of desperation creeping into their voice now. "If you'd just accepted the new structure, if you'd stayed on, you'd have made millions when we went public. Instead, you threw it all away because your pride was hurt." I actually laughed at that. A short, bitter sound. "My pride? Jordan, you stole my life's work. You erased my identity as a creator. You told the world my innovation was yours. And you think this is about hurt pride? I gave you a fair buyout. $75,000 for technology worth millions. You call that fair? It was what your shares were worth at the time. Based on a valuation you controlled. Based on information you withheld. You manipulated everything to minimize what you'd have to pay me." Jordan ran a hand through their hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from years ago. "What do you want from me? You've won. You've taken the company, destroyed my reputation, left me with nothing. What more do you want?" I took a deep breath, considering the question seriously. What did I want? I'd achieved everything I'd planned. The company was mine. Jordan was ruined. Justice had been served. But standing there, looking at this person who'd once been my partner, who I'd once trusted and admired, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. Satisfied, yes. Vindicated, absolutely. But not happy. Revenge is strange like that. You build it up in your mind as this perfect, glorious thing. You imagine the moment of victory will fill all the holes that betrayal created. But it doesn't. It can't. Because revenge doesn't heal wounds. It just proves that you were right to be angry about them. I want you to acknowledge the truth, I finally said. Not publicly. Not in some statement or interview. Just here, right now, between us. I want you to admit that you stole my work. That you knew what you were doing was wrong. And that you didn't care because your ambition mattered more than my trust. Jordan was quiet for a long time, staring out the window. I could see their reflection in the glass, could see the internal struggle playing out on their face. I told myself I was doing what was necessary, they finally said, their voice barely above a whisper. I told myself that business required tough decisions, that sometimes you have to prioritize outcomes over feelings. I convinced myself that I was the one with the skills to make the company successful, so I deserved to be in control. They paused, swallowed hard. But you're right. I knew I was taking credit for your work. I knew the algorithm was yours. I knew you'd trusted me and I was betraying that trust. And I did it anyway because I wanted to be the founder, the visionary, the success story. I couldn't stand the idea of being the business guy who helped someone else's brilliance shine. I wanted it to be my brilliance. The admission hung in the air between us. I'm sorry, Jordan added, and they sounded genuinely broken. For whatever it's worth now, I'm sorry. You deserved better. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. Does it change anything? No, I said honestly. It doesn't change what you did, and it doesn't change what I did in response. But it matters that you can finally admit the truth. Jordan turned away from the window to face me fully. So what happens now? The lawsuits will be dropped once you sign an agreement acknowledging my creation of the algorithm and promising never to make any future IP claims. My lawyers will send over the paperwork. And then you move on with your life, and I move on with mine. OptimizeX is poised to dominate the market. We have the technology, the clients, the talent, and most importantly, the integrity that TechFlow lacked under your leadership. You'll find something else eventually. You're smart and capable when you're not stealing from your partners. Maybe you'll even learn from this. How magnanimous of you, Jordan said bitterly. I'm not being magnanimous. I'm being practical. Keeping you tied up in lawsuits forever doesn't benefit anyone. This way, I get what I want. Recognition, control, and the satisfaction of beating you at your own game. And you get to walk away with at least some dignity intact. Some dignity, Jordan repeated hollowly. More than you left me with, I pointed out. We stood there for another moment, and then Jordan extended their hand. I guess this is goodbye then. I looked at the offered hand, considered it, then shook it briefly. Their grip was weak, defeated. Nothing like the confident handshake from 5 years ago when we'd toasted our partnership with champagne. Goodbye. Jordan, I said. They turned and walked away, collecting their lawyers and leaving the conference room without looking back. I watched them go, watched them step into the elevator, watched the doors close on that chapter of my life. Morgan appeared at my elbow. You okay? Yeah, I said. Yeah, I am. That was a hell of a thing you pulled off. 5 years of planning. Most people don't have that kind of patience. Most people don't get betrayed quite that thoroughly. Fair point. Morgan clapped me on the shoulder. Come on, team's heading out to celebrate. You coming? I took one last look out those floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. Somewhere down there was my old apartment where I'd coded that original algorithm. Somewhere was the coffee shop where Jordan had first pitched me on partnership. Somewhere was the tiny office where I'd signed away my future without realizing it. But up here, 43 floors above all of that, I was someone different. Someone stronger, someone who'd learned that patience and strategy would always beat charm and manipulation in the long run. Yeah, I told Morgan. I'm coming. The weeks following the acquisition were strange, surreal even. I found myself experiencing emotions I hadn't anticipated, a kind of disorientation that comes when a goal you've been fixated on for years suddenly disappears because you've achieved it. The integration process kept me busy, which was probably for the best. There were systems to merge, employees to onboard, clients to reassure. I threw myself into the work, channeling all my energy into making sure OptimizeX's acquisition of TechFlow was as smooth and successful as possible. The former TechFlow employees who transitioned over were a revelation. Without Jordan's toxic leadership, they flourished. The developers in particular had so much to say. Many of them had suspected the truth about the algorithm's origins, had seen the holes in Jordan's technical knowledge, but hadn't felt safe speaking up. We all knew Jordan couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. One senior developer told me over lunch about 2 weeks after the acquisition. But they were the CEO. They signed our paychecks. What were we supposed to do? You could have said something when the lawsuits hit, I pointed out. They shook their head. And risk our jobs? Our careers? It's easy to say people should do the right thing. But when you've got a mortgage and kids to feed, sometimes you keep your head down and hope things work themselves out. I understood that. I couldn't fault people for protecting themselves. The real villain had always been Jordan, not the employees who'd been trapped in an impossible situation. As for Jordan themselves, they largely disappeared from public view. They didn't give interviews, didn't post on social media, didn't try to mount any kind of comeback narrative. The tech press occasionally speculated about what they were doing. I heard rumors of consulting work, maybe joining another startup in a non-leadership role, but nothing concrete materialized. The lawsuits were settled quietly about 6 weeks after the acquisition closed. Jordan signed the agreement my lawyers drafted, acknowledging my creation of the algorithm and relinquishing all IP claims. In exchange, I dropped the personal lawsuits, but kept the patent challenge active to ensure TechFlow's old patents were invalidated. It was done. Legally, professionally, and personally done. But weirdly, that finality brought its own challenges. One night, about 3 months after everything concluded, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, a much nicer apartment than I'd had 5 years ago, in a better building with an actual view, drinking whiskey and thinking about cost. Revenge had cost me 5 years of my life. 5 years where my primary motivation wasn't growth or joy or creativity, but payback. 5 years where every decision was filtered through the lens of, does this get me closer to destroying Jordan? Don't get me wrong, I'd grown tremendously during that time. I'd become a better developer, a better strategist, a better leader. I'd built real skills and genuine relationships, but all of it had been in service of a single consuming goal. And now that goal was accomplished. Jordan was defeated. I'd won, so why did I feel so flat? I called my sister that night. She's the one person who'd been there through everything, who'd listened to me rant and plot and obsess for 5 years. She'd been supportive, but also occasionally worried. Hey, she said when she picked up, immediately sensing something in my tone. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything went according to plan. I got everything I wanted. Then why do you sound like someone who just lost something? I laughed humorlessly. Because maybe I did. I spent 5 years focused on revenge, and now it's over. And I'm realizing I don't know who I am without that anger driving me forward. My sister was quiet for a moment. You know what Mom used to say about revenge? That it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. No, she said that about resentment. About revenge, she said it's like setting fire to someone else's house and being surprised when the smoke bothers you too. That's actually pretty good. She had her moments. Look, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. What Jordan did was wrong, and they deserved consequences. But I've watched you for 5 years, and I've seen what this cost you. You stopped dating because you were too focused on the plan. You turned down job opportunities that might have been fulfilling because they didn't serve your strategy. You stopped writing code just for the joy of it, because everything became a means to an end. Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit. So you're saying I shouldn't have done it? No, I'm saying that revenge isn't free, even when it works perfectly. And now you get to figure out who you are when you're not angry anymore. After we hung up, I sat with those words for a long time. The truth was, she was right. I'd won the battle but sacrificed years of my life to do it. I'd achieved justice but lost time I could never get back. I'd proven I was smarter and more patient than Jordan. but I'd never know who I might have become if I'd just let it go and moved forward without looking back. There's no perfect answer to that dilemma. Sometimes in life, you're forced to choose between accepting injustice or spending enormous energy fighting it. Neither choice is free. Neither path is painless. But here's what I realized. Sitting in that apartment with my whiskey and my thoughts, I didn't regret it. Not really, because the alternative, spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been if I'd just stood up for myself, would have been its own kind of prison. At least this way, I knew. I'd faced my betrayer, taken back what was mine, and proved that patience and intelligence could overcome charm and manipulation. That knowledge, that certainty was worth something. Maybe it was worth 5 years. Maybe it wasn't. I honestly couldn't say. But it was done, and I had to live with the person I'd become in the process of doing it. The thing about reaching the end of a 5-year journey is that you don't just stop moving. Momentum doesn't work that way. You either find a new direction, or you drift. I decided to find a new direction. 4 months after the acquisition, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote code just because I wanted to. Not for a client, not for a strategy, not for revenge. Just because I loved the elegance of a well-crafted algorithm, the satisfaction of solving a complex problem, the pure joy of creation. I built a small tool. Nothing revolutionary, just a productivity app that I personally found useful. I spent evenings and weekends on it, not rushing, not stressing, just enjoying the process. When it was finished, I released it open source. No monetization, no grand strategy, just, hey, I made this thing, maybe you'll find it useful. The tech community response was lovely. People forked it, improved it, thanked me for sharing it. And in those interactions, I rediscovered something I'd lost. The pure pleasure of contributing to the community without any ulterior motive. At OptimizeX, things were going well. The integration of TechFlow's assets had been smoother than expected. Our market share was growing. We were profitable and positioned for long-term success. Morgan was an excellent partner, transparent, fair, respectful. Everything Jordan wasn't. But about 6 months after the acquisition closed, Morgan sat down with me over coffee and asked a question I'd been asking myself. What do you actually want? Long-term, not in terms of strategy or revenge or proving anything, just what would make you happy? I thought about it for a while before answering. I want to build things that matter. I want to work with people I respect. And I want to remember why I fell in love with technology in the first place. Not the business of it, not the competition, but the actual work of creating elegant solutions to hard problems. Morgan nodded thoughtfully. You know, CTO is a very important role here, and you're excellent at it. But I've noticed you're most excited when you're actually building things, not managing the people who build things. Have you ever considered that you might be happier in a different role? Like what? About a year after the acquisition, 1 full year to the day actually, I was at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was there to present about some of the innovative work my R&D team had been doing. The presentation went well. People asked good questions, and I left the stage feeling energized. I was walking through the conference center's lobby, heading toward the exit, when I saw a familiar figure standing near the coffee-like chief innovation officer, or head of R&D. Something where your job is to dream up the next big thing and build the proof of concept, then hand it off to teams to scale. You'd still have equity, still have influence, but you'd spend your time doing what you're actually best at. The idea intrigued me. You'd be okay with that? Are you kidding? Having you focused on innovation instead of operational management would be incredible for the company. We'd get your brilliance where it matters most, and you'd be happier. Seems like a win-win. We restructured my role about a month later. I handed off most of my managerial responsibilities and created a new position for myself. I became OptimizeX's head of advanced research and development. My team was small, just me and 3 other deeply talented developers who were more interested in pushing boundaries than climbing corporate ladders. We had freedom to explore, to experiment, to fail without consequence, as long as we learned from it. It was the first time in years that I woke up excited to go to work. About a year after the acquisition, 1 full year to the day. Actually, I was at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was there to present about some of the innovative work my R&D team had been doing. The presentation went well. People asked good questions, and I left the stage feeling energized. I was walking through the conference center's lobby, heading toward the exit, when I saw a familiar figure standing near the coffee station. Jordan. My first instinct was to turn around, to avoid the interaction entirely. We'd said everything that needed to be said in that conference room a year ago. There was no reason to rehash old wounds. But something made me pause. Maybe curiosity, maybe a need to see how they were doing. Maybe just the recognition that running away from uncomfortable encounters was exhausting, and I was tired of letting this person have any power over my emotional state. I walked over. Jordan saw me coming, and I watched their shoulders tense. Their hand tightened around their coffee cup. But they didn't run either. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Hey." Jordan's voice was quieter than I remembered. Less certain. "You presenting at the conference?" I asked, making awkward small talk because what else do you say to someone who betrayed you and who you subsequently destroyed? "No, just an observing, trying to stay current with the industry." "You?" "Yeah, I presented earlier. Advanced optimization techniques for distributed systems." Jordan nodded slowly. "I saw your name on the schedule. That's actually why I came to this conference. I wanted to see you present. Wanted to see what you were working on now." That surprised me. "Why?" They took a sip of coffee, clearly gathering their thoughts. "Because I needed to see that you were okay. That you'd moved past everything that happened. I know how that sounds. Like I'm the victim somehow. Or like I deserve to know. But I've been carrying around a lot of guilt this past year, and I needed to see that I didn't permanently break you." I studied them carefully. They looked different than they had a year ago. Older, but not in a bad way. More grounded, maybe. Less of the performative confidence. More genuine humility. "I'm more than okay," I told them honestly. "I'm building things I'm proud of. Working with people I respect. Actually enjoying my work instead of just using it as a weapon. I saw the news about your R&D division. The AI-assisted optimization framework you developed got written up in several journals. It's brilliant work." "Thanks." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Two people who used to be partners, then enemies, now just strangers with a painful shared history. "I'm working at a startup now," Jordan offered. "Nothing big. Series A company, about 20 employees. I'm VP of Business Development, not CEO. Not even close to being in charge." "How is it?" "Humbling," they said with a small self-deprecating smile. "But good. The CEO is this brilliant woman who actually knows what she's doing, and I'm learning what it's like to be the support person instead of the star. It's actually kind of a relief, not having to pretend I'm the genius in the room." I nodded. "Sounds like growth." "I've been in therapy," Jordan continued, and I could tell this wasn't easy for them to admit. "Dealing with a lot of stuff. Ego, control issues, my desperate need for external validation. Turns out when you lose everything, you have to face all the reasons why you were so afraid of failure in the first place." "And what did you discover?" "That I was terrified of being ordinary. That I convinced myself success justified any behavior. That I hurt people, hurt you, because I couldn't stand the idea of sharing credit or admitting I needed help." They paused, then added quietly, "My therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies. Working on that." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to say something cruel, something like, "Yeah, I could have told you that 5 years ago." But looking at this person standing in front of me, clearly trying to do better, clearly struggling with their own demons, I found I didn't have the energy for more cruelty. "I'm glad you're working on yourself," I said instead. "I don't expect forgiveness," Jordan said quickly. "I'm not here for that. You don't owe me anything. I saw your name on the schedule, and I thought if I had a chance to see you, I should tell you that you were right. About all of it, and that what I did to you was inexcusable, and that I'm trying to be someone who wouldn't do that to another person." "Okay," I said simply. "Okay?" "Yeah, okay, I believe you, and I appreciate you saying it. But you're right. You don't get forgiveness from me. What you did cost me years of my life, and the fact that I eventually won doesn't erase that cost. But I don't hate you anymore either. I'm just done. Done being angry, done thinking about you, done letting what happened define me. Jordan nodded, and I could see tears starting to form in their eyes. That's fair. That's more than fair. I hope your therapy works out, I said. I hope you become someone who treats people better. And I hope you find success in a way that doesn't require destroying other people to get it. Thank you, Jordan whispered. I started to walk away, then turned back one more time. For what it's worth, you were right about one thing, back at the beginning. I couldn't have built TechFlow alone. I didn't have the business skills back then, but I learned them. And now I have both the technical brilliance and the strategic thinking. So thanks, I guess, for teaching me, through your betrayal, that I needed to become the complete package. Jordan gave me a sad smile. I guess I did teach you something then, even if it was the worst possible way to learn it. Yeah, I agreed. The worst possible way. And then I walked away. Not with anger, not with triumph, just with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that chapter was truly, finally closed. That night, back in my hotel room, I thought about the encounter with Jordan, about revenge, justice, growth, and what it all meant. Here's the truth I'd discovered over the past year. Revenge had been satisfying, but it wasn't what healed me. Destroying Jordan's company, taking back my algorithm, proving I was smarter and more strategic, all of that felt good in the moment, but it didn't fill the holes that betrayal had created. What healed me was rediscovering my love for the work itself, building things with my R&D team, mentoring younger developers, contributing to open source projects, creating without the weight of proving anything to anyone. The real victory wasn't the conference room where Jordan signed over their company. It was the moment I realized I could write code for the pure joy of it again. It was the evenings I spent lost in a problem, not because it served some greater strategy, but because the problem itself was fascinating. Revenge had been the appetizer. Recovery was the main course. And yeah, it felt good to know that Jordan was struggling, that they'd lost their empire, that everyone now knew the truth. I'm not going to pretend I'm above those feelings, but the deep, lasting satisfaction came from something else entirely. From knowing I'd survived betrayal and come out stronger, more skilled, more complete. I'd won not by destroying Jordan, but by becoming someone who didn't need revenge to feel whole. That's a subtle but crucial distinction 2 years after the acquisition, 3 years after I'd filed. Those initial lawsuits, OptimizeX, had become the dominant player in our market segment. We'd achieved a valuation of $200 million. My equity stake made me wealthy in a way I'd once only dreamed about. But more importantly, we'd built something I was genuinely proud of. A company with strong ethics, where technical talent was valued and credited, where leadership was transparent and fair. Everything TechFlow under Jordan's leadership hadn't been. My R&D team had grown to 15 people, and we were working on cutting-edge problems that excited me every single day. I'd published papers, given keynotes at major conferences, and established myself as a thought leader in the field, not through self-promotion or stolen work, but through genuine contribution and innovation. People in the industry knew my name now, not as the person Jordan screwed over, but as a brilliant technologist in my own right. That recognition, earned through my own merit, meant more than any revenge ever could. I also started a small mentorship program for young developers, particularly those who'd been taken advantage of by unscrupulous business partners. I taught them what I'd learned the hard way: document everything, understand your contracts, know your worth, and never trust someone who tries to convince you that your contribution isn't as valuable as theirs. Several of my mentees went on to found their own successful companies. A few others became senior developers at major tech firms. One of them even sent me a message that read, "You saved me from making the same mistakes you did. Thank you for turning your pain into wisdom we could learn from." That message made me cry. Good tears for once. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, the one who was about to sign that partnership agreement with Jordan, what would I say? I've thought about this question a lot. Part of me wants to say, don't do it. Walk away. Build the company yourself, even if it takes longer. Protect yourself. But another part of me knows that without that betrayal, without that 5-year journey through anger and planning and revenge, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have the skills, the strength, the depth of character that came from surviving and ultimately triumphing over that experience. So maybe I'd say something different. This is going to hurt. It's going to hurt worse than anything you've experienced so far. You're going to feel betrayed, humiliated, and powerless, but you're also going to survive it. And on the other side of that survival, you're going to be someone extraordinary, someone who understands both the technical and business sides, someone who knows how to be patient and strategic, someone who never again allows themselves to be taken advantage of. The pain is going to forge you into something stronger than you can currently imagine. So sign the papers. Trust Jordan. Let yourself be betrayed, because the person you become in response to that betrayal will be capable of things the current you can't even dream of. Is that healthy advice? I honestly don't know. Probably a therapist would say no. That I'm romanticizing trauma or justifying suffering through the lens of outcome. But it's how I've made peace with everything that happened. So where am I now? 5 years after I started planning my revenge, 2 years after it succeeded. I'm sitting in my office at OptimizeX, a corner office with windows overlooking the city, decorated with whiteboards covered in equations and diagrams that only a handful of people could understand. I'm working on a problem that fascinates me: quantum-resistant encryption algorithms for distributed systems. It's challenging work, the kind that makes my brain hurt in the best possible way. My team is in the conference room down the hall, brainstorming approaches to a particularly tricky optimization challenge. In an hour, I'll join them, and we'll debate and argue and eventually stumble toward something brilliant. Tomorrow, I'm having dinner with Morgan to discuss potential directions for our next major research initiative. After that, I'm meeting with one of my mentees who's considering a startup and wants advice on partnership agreements. Next week, I'm presenting at a major industry conference, not because I need the validation, but because I have genuine insights to share that might help other developers solve hard problems. My personal life has improved too. About 6 months ago, I started dating someone I met through a friend, another developer who understands the work and the passion behind it. It's early, but it's good, healthy, built on honesty and mutual respect instead of strategic maneuvering. I sleep well at night. The anger that used to keep me awake, that used to twist in my gut like a living thing, is gone. Not suppressed or ignored, but genuinely resolved. Sometimes, not often, but occasionally, I think about Jordan. I wonder how they're doing, whether their therapy is working, whether they've managed to build something honest and good. I hope they have. Not for their sake, really, but for mine. Because if they've grown and changed, it means the destruction I caused served a purpose beyond just satisfying my need for revenge. It means maybe they learned something that will prevent them from hurting someone else the way they hurt me. That would make all of it mean something more than just a personal vendetta. It would make it a correction, a course adjustment, a necessary pain that led to growth for both of us. I don't know if that's true. I'll probably never know. Jordan and I aren't in contact, and that's appropriate. Some bridges once burned should stay burned, but I can live with the uncertainty. I can live with the complexity of being both the victim and the victor, both the wronged and the wrathful, both the destroyed and the destroyer. Because ultimately, here's what I've learned. Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, but sometimes they overlap. Standing up for yourself and seeking payback aren't mutually exclusive. You can be both righteous and ruthless, both justified and unforgiving. The world isn't black and white. Moral choices aren't always clear-cut. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the harsh thing, the patient thing, the calculated thing. I spent 5 years planning the perfect revenge, and when I executed it, it worked exactly as I'd hoped. Jordan lost everything. I got everything back, plus interest. Was it worth it? Was it right? Was it justice or just vengeance dressed up in prettier clothes? I don't have a definitive answer to those questions. I'm not sure anyone could. But I can tell you this: I don't regret it. Not the plan, not the execution, not the outcome. I stood up for myself when no one else would. I refused to let betrayal be the end of my story. I transformed pain into power, anger into strategy, and defeat into triumph. And if that makes me ruthless, well, maybe sometimes the world needs people who are willing to be ruthless in pursuit of justice. Or maybe I'm just rationalizing revenge because it felt so damn good. Probably somewhere in between. So what's the lesson here? What's the takeaway from this 5-year journey of betrayal and revenge? I think there are several, depending on who you are and what you need to hear. If you've been betrayed, you can survive it. You can come back from it. You can become someone stronger and more capable than the person who wronged you. The path might be long, and it might require patience you didn't know you had. But justice, in whatever form that takes for you, is possible. If you're considering betraying someone, don't. Not because of some moral platitude, but because you never know how patient your victim might be. You never know what skills they might develop, what connections they might make, what plan they might be executing while you're celebrating your ill-gotten success. Karma isn't mystical, it's just patient people waiting for the right moment to act. If you're currently planning revenge, make sure it's worth the cost. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Make sure you're not sacrificing your present and future on the altar of past wrongs. And most importantly, make sure that when the revenge is complete, you have a plan for who you'll be after. Because revenge ends, but you still have to keep living. If you're trying to move past betrayal without revenge, that's valid too. That might even be healthier. Not everyone needs vindication through destruction. Some people find peace through letting go, through building something new separate from what was taken, through choosing growth over payback. There's no single right answer. For me, revenge was what I needed. It was how I processed the betrayal and reclaimed my power. It worked because I was patient, strategic, and willing to pay the price in time and energy. But it's not the only path. It's just the one I chose, so that's my story. 5 years of planning, 1 perfect execution, and a lifetime of figuring out what it all meant. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that surge of satisfaction when Jordan had to sign over their company, if you understand what it's like to be betrayed and to dream of justice, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Did you get revenge or did you let it go? What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment, and some of your stories are even more intense than mine. If you're not subscribed yet, click that subscribe button because I share stories like this regularly. Stories about justice, revenge, karma, and the complex reality of human relationships. Stories that remind us we're not alone in our struggles. Thanks for listening to this one. It was a long journey, both the 5 years I lived it and the hour you just spent hearing about it. I hope it was worth your time. Until next time, stay strong, stay strategic, and never let anyone convince you that you don't deserve credit for your own brilliance.